Thank you all so much for being here. We are just not even an appetizer, a side dish. We're like a bowl of nuts on the side of a really great meal of a show. I've got some amazing guests here on our panel. I'll introduce them real quick, and then we'll get into it. This part's going to take like 30 minutes, so if you need to go to the bathroom, we'll be done soon. To my immediate left is Dr. Emily Stacey, professor of political science at Rose State University. Welcome, Emily. In the middle is the Honorable Mayor David Holt. And my good friend Tamya Cox-Touré, Executive Director of the ACLU of Oklahoma. When we walked in, I brought my kids to the show tonight or today, and my daughter said, "She has the same hair as me," and they was very excited. So it was a braid kind of day. I didn't even know. I didn't get the memo. All right, so the show we just saw really explores personal experiences and how they shape our understanding of the Constitution and our founding documents. So we'll go this way, this order. Emily, starting with you, how has your professional journey influenced your understanding of the Constitution in everyday American life?
So I'm really lucky that I get to do what you just watched pretty much every day and be excited and passionate about the American democracy and getting students, specifically younger folks, fired up for participating in their democracy. And I bet that Heidi saw me get really excited whenever she started talking about the Ninth Amendment, because literally nobody knows what that thing says. It is my absolute favorite thing. There are about 1,000 kids running around Oklahoma that can tell you that Dr. Stacey's favorite amendment is the Ninth. And it's because it literally is your founding fathers being woke, right? They are being woke because in 1791, they can't foresee the rainbows and kitties that bring you the internet or driverless cars or your right to medical marijuana. But that Ninth Amendment says, hey man, it's in your court. The ball is in your court, but you have to be aware enough, cognizant enough to know what you lack in a 21st century democracy and demand those things from your government. This is not an answer to your question. I simply was excited about the Ninth Amendment. I'm sorry, my friend. In terms of my personal relationship with the Constitution, obviously I'm an evangelical about it, specifically the Bill of Rights. And so, like I said, I really loved that this entire work was surrounded and predicated on the Ninth Amendment. So I'll let somebody.
Sure. So you're saying, Andy, you're saying like, how has your professional life sort of given you an appreciation for the Constitution?
That's correct.
Yeah. The question. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I've chosen a life. I've always been in some kind of public service at every level of government. So I've chosen a life that makes me think about all of this stuff a lot. I hope everybody thinks about it to some degree, but I recognize that if you're not in elected office or working for the government, then maybe you don't think about it as much. And I guess I'll share what I've come to feel at age 46 about all of this. As you see Americans as humans in their civic lives, both at their best and their worst, and you get the opportunity to travel around the world and the opportunity maybe to spend some time actually thinking about global history. I mean, I think the conclusion I've really come to is that this is an outlier, what we have here, right? And as was sort of debated here a few minutes ago, the alternative to the American Constitution is not necessarily a better Constitution. I mean, that sounds nice, sure, but the much more frequent alternative in the grand sweep of human history is no such agreement. It is actually the domination of one person or a group of people who have managed to sort of get control over resources and power. And actually, that is how most humans have lived in the entire history. And actually, there's a lot of humans who live that way today on this planet, right? And so the Constitution symbolizes an agreement that we won't live that way, that we'll kind of divide up this power a little more equally, not perfectly equally, but like a little bit more than just a totalitarian government. And then it does provide the tools to like continue to improve upon that agreement. It is ultimately just a piece of paper. It only works as long as we all agree to it. And of course, all of us are born into it. None of us, other than immigrants, choose to agree to it. But then hopefully that's why the American Legion and other groups that maybe better understood these alternatives, because they fought against the alternatives. And so they came home and they decided to hey, let's try to get people to really understand what they were born into. Not that they shouldn't take this for granted. And so professors do this work, law school deans and mayors do this work, the ACLU does this work. We're actually all kind of ambassadors out there trying to help people understand that this is not assured. This life that we have, as frustrating and as and as inadequate sometimes as it may seem, could be much worse. And so that's why I would have voted for keeping the Constitution at the end of this show, not because we couldn't improve upon it, but because we actually do have, in theory, the mechanisms to improve upon it, but also because the alternative can be absolute totalitarian chaos. And I hope that we're obviously not on that path right now. And I hope that we finally have people in positions of responsibility and elected positions in this country who do at some point finally stand up and say that this document and the rights that it protects are actually one of the greatest accomplishments in human history, and we've got to keep going with it.
Like that too, just speaking out.
Thank me. I want you to say it into a microphone.
These things out loud. Yes. Thank you for your leadership on that, Mayor Holt. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
One, thanks Andy for having me. The ACLU of Oklahoma, founded in 1964, such an important time, but our national organization founded in 1920 by a group of folks that had the audacity to think that we all deserve the rights under the Constitution. So in our professional lives, our jobs are really to interrogate the Constitution every day. And we get to do that in so many different ways. I have some of my staff here, some of our young lawyers that are doing that at the 10th Circuit, arguing regarding the rights, right? And so from a professional standpoint, I get to see it on both sides. I'm your lawyer who's never in the courtroom because I am a lobbyist and I've been in policy my entire career. Lobbying for abortion rights and civil rights on 23rd Street, not always the easiest thing. But what we get to do is really lean into those foundational promises of the Constitution. But our job, and what we feel is our job, is really to interrogate that and tell us and talk to legislators and elected officials as to why that's not always working out or why the laws are passing are not living up to those values. So not only do we come from a legal perspective, but I think the ACLU, we come from a values perspective. And that is what sometimes is missing from what's happening on the federal level to what's happening at the local level. So it's deeply personal for me as a Black woman, not born and raised in Oklahoma, but have lived in Oklahoma for a very long time. And really those ideals aren't always out there, but I do have a responsibility, even as a Black woman in this country that may not have always enjoyed these rights. I do have a responsibility to ensure that next generation gets to enjoy those rights. And that's what I think that our professional and how the Constitution continues to play a very important role in our professional lives and our work.
Thank you. Tamya, hang on to that microphone because I want to hear your answer first to this next question. The play examines this tension between constitutional ideals and lived reality. In your work at the ACLU or otherwise, where have you seen that greatest gap between constitutional promises and their practical implementation in the world?
Ooh, that's a hard one because we see it every day, right? For the ACLU, our organization, we are an organization that we have this kind of three-tiered model, right? We have our litigation, where many people know us as an opportunity to sue the government when those rights have been violated. But an arm of ours that a lot of people are seeing play out today is really in our organizing and our community work, where we are in the community, talking to community stakeholders and everyday folks about how are these rights really working out for you? Where is those intersections and what's not working? So those play out and we realize there is a huge gap. Regardless if the policymakers are seeing that gap and acknowledging that, but how it's impacting the everyday lives of folks. And that's what we see. For us, it's a far and wide gap that we every day are trying to make smaller. But more importantly, we have to ensure that us as everyday Oklahomans have an opportunity together and collectively as community have the tools and resources that we need to make that gap smaller. And we think that one way through that is through community knowledge, right? And we do these Know Your Rights trainings. And sometimes our Know Your Rights trainings are simply, what are your rights when interacting with law enforcement? And I think we narrow that gap about those constitutional ideals and the lived experiences of people by ensuring that they're simply educated. And we believe that is one of the biggest resources that we have in a time right now where we may not be able to count on the courts to protect those rights. We may not be able to count on our elected officials to protect those rights, but we can count on community to protect those rights.
Mayor Holt?
Restate the question, please.
Is where do you see the greatest gap between constitutional ideals and the actual lives we live?
Okay. Well, I think like one of the sort of foundations of the Constitution is an idea of equal opportunity. Now, as was just presented, when it was written, the universe of people that they were considering to have equal opportunity was just, white male landowners. But now we think of the Constitution as applicable to all human beings living in this country. And obviously debate about citizenship or not, but it's far broader, right? And as a mayor, certainly I'm thinking about every single human being in this city of 700,000. And I'm wanting that ideal that I think is attempted to be preserved by some interpretation of the Constitution, that we should all have equal opportunity. And I'm wanting to, as a mayor, and as a resident of this city, try to provide that. But to your question, obviously that doesn't exist right now. And not that, and we're not unique in that here in Oklahoma City, but a white kid who grows up at Northwest 150th and Council is going to have a life expectancy that is 10 to 15 years longer, a much higher level of educational attainment, a much higher level of economic success than a black kid who grows up near 23rd and MLK. So obviously we are not delivering unequal opportunity. I'm one of those who might say that the country does not promise, Constitution does not promise equal outcomes, but it certainly presents promises, I think, equal opportunity. And so certainly that's part of the work we do every day. It's incremental, it's frustratingly slow, but it's to me, I'm used to that, I'm conditioned to that, as long as we're still, I guess maybe in the metaphor in the play, as long as we're still moving forward on the beach, then to me, we're making progress. But definitely that's the disconnect, that's where we fall short today in Oklahoma City.
Good. So I've got two answers to this, I think. The first is in terms of teaching, I think there is there's not, I don't think. I was just in a national article about this past week. There is this idea that we're all woke, liberal indoctrinators. And so whenever students come to my classroom on the very first day of an American government class, it's oh my gosh, this lady is going to be a socialist and she's going to flaming, liberal hair. And that is absolutely not my classroom. In fact, I teach from less from a partisan standpoint and much more from a generational politics standpoint. And that helps immensely in breaking down a lot of those intimidation barriers with my students, because we're talking about politics in a way that they understand and makes it applicable to their lives versus the hyperpolarization and the vitriol and the volatility that we see in today's environment. I think my second answer is media literacy. I think that's probably kind of goes along with everybody's issue and everybody's response, is that, again, education is the best penicillin, right? Sunlight, best disinfectant. And when you have students who are coming in and reading, Reddit, and they're getting their information from Uncle Jim Bob's Facebook page, and the sky is orange and not blue, it makes it really difficult for us to have these conversations about these founding documents from a place of this is where we are. This is America. This is what they said. We can talk about the intentions. We can talk about the context and the day in which they lived and the things that have changed. But fundamentally, if we're not coming in from a place of the sky is blue, it makes it incredibly difficult for us to have any sort of really hard conversations politically and decide a consensus for the democracy going forward.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but this week in particular, next one's coming to you, David. But this week in particular, I've been surveying the media landscape every day on the headlines and just looking at every major, and they're not the same.
They're not.
They vary quite a bit. I want to have one other follow-up as a moment of personal privilege, and then the next question is for the mayor. In the play and in this panel, we've discussed how only white landowners were allowed to have a say in the formation of the Constitution. That kind of thing is not just in the Constitution, right? Like, this is something we can all be involved in. Even in my neighborhood, we have a homeowners group. It's not really an association. We just meet for drinks. And we, because it's so hard to do anything, and we realized this week that only people who are by the bylaws allowed to have a voice in the homeowners association are those who own the homes. I mean, that's in the name, homeowners association. But it's 2025. Like, a lot of people who live there are very engaged and don't own the building itself. And that was one of our first orders of business, is like, we should have an Easter egg hunt and rewrite these bylaws to make sure that everyone who lives here has a voice. And the drinks were good too. So I'm just saying that as like something to think about when you leave here and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to make a difference in the Constitution. Start with your local bylaws and just make sure that at the very most local level, like the people who are going to be angry about the height of your grass, that you have a voice in that. All right, so the show uses personal storytelling as a way to make constitutional concepts more accessible. We're not all walking around preaching the Ninth Amendment, though maybe we should. Mayor Holt, in your role on any level, I'm thinking particularly as mayor, but how do you help citizens connect with sometimes abstract legal or political concepts?
Well, that is part of the job, is communicating, and yeah, and it's not too different from being a professor as well. You know,
On News 9. You're a hell of a communicator.
Yeah, I think actually context is, if I could just pick one word, you know, you mentioned being on News 9. So actually every Thursday morning I'm live. I wake up 3 minutes before that interview. Just a little BTS there for you. And live on Channel 4. And then I used to be live on Channel 9, but now I do it once a month in studio or whatever. But I used to be at like 6 a.m. live on both stations. And so anyways, you get like 4 minutes, right? But they try to have this conversation. They try to ask you like 3 different questions. And I usually eat up the time, just like I am right now, by providing context, because context is how ultimately, I mean, everybody can understand this stuff, but we have a tendency, if you're in something, whatever it is, right, to kind of skip over everything and make it very hard for them to access because they're not thinking about it every single day. So they'll be like, I don't know, you know, hey, Mayor, you're opening a new park next week. Now, they just wanted me to say, like, how many swing sets probably are in the park. But I'll be like, yes. And as you know, in 2017, the voters of Oklahoma City approved approved a $988 million bond issue. And, of course, this was a part of the tranche in year 8. And, you know, and so I do tend to do that. But it is, like, part of me thinking, this is really important that they understand the bigger picture here. Similarly, like at that park dedication, I'm probably going to tell the whole like civic story of how we got there, because it can feel like these things just like fall out of the sky, you know, and you're like, no, like Councilman John Smith, who's dead now, you know, like fought for this park in 2014, and you know, and there was a meeting in 2016. It was very vital, you know, and like, but I like telling those stories. So I guess to your question, I mean, that's what I try to do. I try to help people understand how these things happen, sort of see themselves, even if they weren't a part of that story, like how they could have been in a part of that story, maybe to inspire them to be a part of the next story, you know, and understand like how things happen in the civic life of a community.
Tamya, can I ask you the same question? How do you help bring those big concepts home?
It's the same answer, right? Coming from someone that's on the other side of the politics in the sense of like the organizing and the litigation side, it's the context. It's the storytelling. I've been a lobbyist for almost 20 years now. It is a whole different beast than it was when I first started in early 2007, 8, 9, 10, right? And before I could go in there as the ACLU person and say, this bill is unconstitutional. This is, we are gonna sue, we're ready. That does not necessarily work. So a lot of the times where I'm talking to legislators or advising our young staff or our staff when they're talking to policymakers, we got to tell a story. We've got to break it down as to why this piece of legislation, why this is going to hurt families, individuals, communities. And that gets further, even though I have the back of so many lawyers, whether it's here locally or nationally, those are not resonating. So it's the context, it's the storytelling. That's how we change, that's how progress is made, is by each story. So that is why when we are telling you, or you get the text from us about contact your legislator, it's really, we're asking you to share your story. We're asking you to create that narrative as to why this is important to you and share that, because that is how change is gonna make by one story at a time.
Emily, this is your actual job.
This is my actual job.
So how do you do it?
Very well, in fact. I love my job. It's fabulous. I'm so blessed. Like I mentioned before, I make things applicable to them, right? It's very difficult sometimes to make 237-year-old, that's how old our Constitution is, thank you, Constitution Day last year. It's sometimes just difficult to make those concepts like judicial review is sexy for these kids. And so I apply current events we do and try to bring in anything applicable to their daily lives into my American federal government classes. It's really about getting them to open up their minds and making sure that they're listening, as we've just heard, listening to other people's stories. I give them specifically a debate assignment that they have done. This is my flaming hoop in my American government classes. I give them the Pew ideology quiz and split them up into liberal, conservative, and independent, depending on where they land on that spectrum, and give them the same four topics and have them do research, and then they come together at the end of like next week, in fact, is debate week, and they come together and have these hard conversations that we're not having in the wider American discourse. And they come to this realization throughout the semester that, oh, okay, Pew labeled us all conservatives or all liberal, but we don't agree on 100% of everything, even within our own group. I think it is immensely important for us to break down the intimidation barrier in terms of discourse, and that is, I will like die on this hill. Unify America, I will give them a shout out. It's a software platform that connects college students to other college students from across the country, and so I make my kids do this as a mandatory assignment, and so they do a demographic survey, age, sex, ethnicity, gender, whatever, and go through the deal. And then they're paired with another college student to have conversations, just have discourse. And they're prompted when they get on this software. And one of the most controversial is maybe free speech should be allowed on campus even when it's controversial or whenever it offends me. And then they rank it from I totally agree to I totally disagree. And then they just have discourse about why they responded that way. Nobody is trying to convince the other person of why they're right, why they're wrong, or to come over to my side. It's simply having conversation. And that is, I can't tell you what an unbelievable tool that has been in my classes to just have them understand that you're not going to get canceled, right? Just because you have this opinion and you want to share it, it doesn't mean we're going to cancel you, right? My classroom has become a safe space, and not the, cry in the corner Fox News type of definition, but a space for all of us to be able to share our opinions and for us to have that discourse, because that is absolutely what is missing in the wider democracy. I don't know if I answered your question again.
That was good. I was wowed either way. I will give a quick plug. Next Thursday and Friday, Emily and I are hosting an event event at Rose State College called CivicsCon. It's an event that my organization started in 2020. It's like Comic Con, but for this kind of nerd, right? Like, and it's the whole goal, and the goal of my organization is to help take abstract concepts and make them applicable to people's lives, right? There's a lot of people, your friends and neighbors, who care about what's happening in our city and our state. We call them politically curious. They're like, oh, I heard about that. And they want to do something, and they don't know where to start. And so we're taking the if you build it, they will come approach. So we built a conference around civic engagement. We've got a wide range of topics. Should be really fun. Our keynote speaker on Friday is the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison. He's a great speaker. It'll be fun. I'll be there. We'll do tag team. We might do a song and dance. With some soft shoe, that's right. My ankles are already spraining as we sit here. All right, one final question for our panel. Emily, I'll start with you, and we'll go this way again. At the end of the play, right, there is a debate about should we keep it or should we let it go? We already know where Holt falls on this. So the question is not which way do you fall necessarily. I think we all agree, right, that it could use some improvements. For sure. Either that's wholesale or in pieces. And so for each of you, what would you change? Like, pick one thing, and what do you think? This is something that I would highlight as like something we should re-examine.
You really need to smart with me? So I don't, oh God, pick one thing. So I'm a fan of Thomas Jefferson's sentiment. Every 9 years was the exact approximate time in which we were supposed to be rewriting our Constitution. So not even necessarily a generation. So I'm a big fan. We need to at least go back to the drawing board. Pick one thing, man. Oh my God. Okay, so I think that. Oh my God. I think that we need to be less vague in some places, and perhaps get rid of some of the Queen's English. That may help some clarification parts of things. I know I'm being nitpicky because I don't have any substantive. I don't know, Andy. I should have prepped this question a little bit better. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know.
We'll just assume that you have so many, it's hard to choose your favorite. That's fair.
I just came up with one that I think you might like. It's topical. I think that one of the main elements of the Constitution is actually just an interpretation. Yeah. We accept it so much, but Marbury versus Madison is basically established after the drafting of the Constitution a true, equal branch, giving the judiciary the ability to interpret the acts of the other two branches. But again, this is merely exists because for the last 2 centuries we've all accepted a later ruling that gave that gave that body that made the ruling this power. This obviously has worked, but we live in a moment right now where you have one of the other branches basically saying, if this doesn't go the way I like, I'm not going to follow essentially Marbury versus Madison, and who's going to make me? And I don't know who's going to make him. So if I were going to fix something in the Constitution, it would be to figure out a way to not have to rely upon Marbury versus Madison, but to have this baked into the Constitution that there is some sort of enforcement. I don't know. I don't have that answer, but I do have the idea that this needs to be addressed. I have no confidence it will be. I mean, but you just had a. We're just a panel, I mean, like we're allowed to say whatever we want, I guess. So, but clearly that is a flaw that has only worked because we've all sort of agreed about it for 200 years now. But it's an issue.
Can I have my turn back now?
You may.
Turn back now. So due process, I think, you spurred something in me, sir. I think the clarification on due process, who does it belong to? I just yelled on OETA about this. If we're going to decide what a citizen is and who a citizen is versus a visa holder, status holder, et cetera, we need to delineate those rights. And I think due process is one of those that we are very much in the process of litigating and figuring out who is who and what is what. Thank you for stirring that loose, my friend. I appreciate that.
Well, I'm sure my staff is looking at me and they have their own answers. It's great to be the boss because this is what I will say on behalf of the ACLU. But what I would add is an explicit right to bodily autonomy, that we cannot be anywhere if we do not have control over our bodies. And I think that encompasses women's rights. I think that encompasses too as LGBTQ rights. And so that is what I would add explicitly. And one thing I would add, just a personal privilege, it is Dean Mayor Holt, as I call him, because I am a proud graduate of OCU Law, as he is now. So we were actually at a lecture on Thursday with an amazing legal scholar as well as author. When Rights Go Wrong, I think that's the name of his book. And we were talking about this, and he is talking about the Constitution, the evolution, and it was so perfect timing. So I can't lie, Andy, I asked him one of your questions because I wanted to know. And I asked him, would he keep it? This is a legal scholar that worked in the Biden administration, that is a professor at Columbia University, a whole list of things. And I said, would you keep it or would you replace it? And I was really surprised, and he said he'd replace it. He said, we're so beholden to this document that it's okay for us to think differently. So that really intrigued me as an ACLU professional, thinking about we are one of the most conservative organizations, even though other folks see us as not, because we really think about the Constitution and what it means. And this is what it says, and this is what we are fighting for. But what I thought was really interesting in that moment was that when he talked about the opportunity for amendments, and we heard it here on the play as well about the Reconstruction Amendments that gave the rights and equality essentially to Black folks, right? And then we talked a little bit about the right to vote for women. And what he said, and that stayed and resonates with me, and it resonates so much with me today, was that these amendments came because of community organizing, that it was happening in communities, it was happening from the power of the people that caused legislators that did not look like them, that did not represent them, to come out and say, we gotta make these changes. So if anything that we get out today from this amazing play that inspired me, and I don't get inspired that often, unfortunately, I'm too jaded, but has inspired me and has encouraged me to work, to know that I did a little look-see when I got here because I drove past City Hall to see what was happening, right? The power of the people, and that is what's gonna make this change. So today is an important day. I'm so happy that you all are here, and that is what I hope we get out of everything, is that what the Constitution means to me, I hope it all means that we're gonna share our stories, we're gonna get out there and fight for the Constitution, for democracy, and that we are gonna see a better day.
I am so grateful that Tamya stole my thunder. That's exactly what I was gonna close on. I was gonna go out and do it, and she said it, which is great. Two other plugs. One, I forgot to say, if you are interested in attending CivicsCon, you can go to civicscon.com. Tickets are only $25. They're still available. We'd love to have you. Secondly, there are probably many groups. I'm aware of one sizable effort nationwide to envision a new constitution, not to remove this one, but to start building a new one. The group is called Democracy 2076. If you Google Democracy 2076, they're having a convening in June again in Colorado, and I'm hoping to attend. I've been on Zoom calls, but not in person. But from every report I've heard and from my participation, it's been the kind of conversation around a new constitution that we all hope it would be. I don't know if it'll result in a new constitution. That is way farther away than we can see. But the idea that there are people talking to one another, meeting in rooms, gathering together to have these important conversations is vitally important, because if we don't dream together, we will die together, right? And so let's dream big dreams. Thank you, Emily and OKC Rep, for having everybody here. And a big hand for our panelists today once more.
Please join us for What the Constitution Means to Me, April 3rd to 13th at the Oklahoma Contemporary.
You can get your tickets at okcrep.org.